Hello, welcome to another video where I talk about some music gear, my favorite feature on that piece of gear. Today I'm going to talk about what for me is a brand new piece of kit. It's the Korg SQ1. It's a CV sequencer, also has MIDI. Very simple 16 step or 2x8 step, but with some very interesting, what to call them, quirks almost, which is to say different layers that interact, and that's what I'll be looking at later. I would say that this is the first piece of gear that I have unpacked and without looking at the manual at all, plugged in, started playing with, and not only felt very satisfied immediately, but was making very enthusiastic noises straight out of the box. It's fantastically intuitive, and as you go through its layers, it basically instructs you automatically in how to use it. Like I say, the thing I find really fascinating about it is the way it has these layers in the sequencer that interact and affect each other a great deal. So I'll give a demonstration of this feature. There are plenty of very good tutorials and demos and even sessions using the sequencer on YouTube already. So I'll just emphasize the interactive quality of the different layers, the way they interact with each other, because that is definitely my favorite feature. But like I say, I'm extremely enthusiastic generally about it. It's a fantastically straightforward and nicely warm, rounded CV sequencer with lots of applications, both for melodic material and modulation with CV. Yes, so that's the Korg SQ1. It is, I would hasten to add, also a very pleasantly designed and proportioned little box. It's made out of metal, built like a tank. The whole thing inspires a great deal of confidence. I'm very impressed.
Okay, this is the Korg SQ1. It is, of course, a sequencer alone, so you have to patch it into something. So for this video, I've patched it into an Erica Synths Pico System 3, which is a lovely self-contained modular system, and is a whole other story to itself, which maybe one day I'll tell in a different video. But for now, I've just set up an extremely simple patch. We have two separate oscillators going into two separate LPGs, which are low-pass gates. They're a cross between a VCA and a filter. And then the two separate signals go into a mixer, and then I record them so we can hear them. So basically, we have two independent oscillators, so we can hear the two 8-step sequences that can run concurrently. But to begin with, I'm going to play just a very simple one pitch 16-step sequence on one of the oscillators. So there we have our 16 steps. There are two possibilities on the sequencer mode for 16 steps, one where it plays A and then B, one where it cascades between A and B. Of course, with one note you wouldn't hear the difference, but that is how they work. We have a duty knob here which increases the length of the gate, which in the case of the Erica Synths LPG not only makes the note louder, but it opens the filter at the same time. So you get an increase of signal to, so to speak, both the VCA aspect and the filter aspect. Of course, what the gate would do in an increased gate length depends on what kind of machine you're sending it to. In this case, it's working like a kind of trigger, but obviously you could send a gate as a pulse or many different sorts of things as different sorts of CV. Okay, so just a couple of things to say about tuning. I have it set on 2 volts. You can have 1 volt, 2 volts, 5 and 8 volts, which is the CV range of each oscillator. So the effect of that will depend depend a lot on what kind of oscillator you're sending the CV to. It can be used quite creatively, so you can switch very fluently between the different voltage levels with some really interesting effects, again depending very much on how the oscillators you're sending it to behave. The second thing is the scale quantization. I have it set to chromatic, which will give me 12 at 1 volt per octave will give me 12 semitones in the octave. You can then normalize to major or minor scale, and then last of all there's linear, which is like a frequency sweep on an oscillator, so it's everything in between and it's not normalized, so you can go everywhere between the tempered pitches. Okay, so I'll just dial in some new pitches so we get something slightly less dull. Okay, so now we have a little bit more variety. And what I'm going to do now is just bring in the second oscillator, which is receiving the same 16-step sequence. It's an octave below, so it has a kind of sub oscillator effect as it's playing now. We then have two more sequencer modes we'll look at. I'm not going to look at the CV or random modes, but the mode we'll move to now will change from playing one 16-step sequence to two 8-step sequences, one to the first oscillator, one to the second. And I'll just turn up the duty a little bit so the filter's open a bit. And then we will look at now the gate on off. So the gate on off, when you turn a gate off, it becomes a rest. And you can hear immediately between the two sequences some quite interesting rhythmic effects. Really quite nice. So the rest are the same gate length as the played gates. Active step is something rather different. So active step will turn a step on and off, and if it's off, the sequencer will just move directly to the next active step, so there's no rest. So just put in a couple of these, and again further we begin to get deeper into a kind of polyrhythmic feeling. The other thing active step can do, of course, is change the length of the sequences. So sequencer A going to the first oscillator is just 2 notes, sequence B is 3, and if we look at the gate on and off, the second note of A is actually a rest, and I can put a rest in here. So again we get a huge variety from what's essentially very little information. And this is what I really like about the sequencer, is the interaction of these different modes brings really, really interesting results, and constantly. I mean, it's possible really to make a great deal of variety, as you can see and hear. The next thing I want to look at is the slide mode. Ordinarily, when you have all gates on, the slide mode is something like a slew between different pitches. Because it increases the gate length, we also, in this case here, the filter open a little bit. But what's really interesting is when you play it in conjunction with rests. So when you put the slide on a step before a rest, it will sustain that gate for the length of the active gate and the rests. So I'll just put one in a second. Sorry, it's my mistake. It should be here. So we can hear obviously the second oscillator there. And again, this gives us another layer of a a really interesting polyrhythmical thing. So, I mean, this is obviously just a very simple, banal example, but you can see the potential here that there's great fun to be had with these features. And like I say, the way the gate will affect wherever you send it varies enormously. I just have it in this case with the sustain gates, which will open the filter too, but that's to do with the low pass gate. It could be any number of things. Okay, so that's how the slide works in conjunction with the res on gate on off. The last mode is the step jump. So if we just get all the gates firing here, what this will do is jump to a particular step and repeat it. So you can play your sequence in the order you like. Of course, pitch-wise, it's limited to what sequences you've input, but you can always change these as you play. I mean, there's nothing stopping you. All of these pitch knobs are usable, are tweakable live, of course. If you have some rests put in and you hold those down, you will of course just get a sustained rest or a repeated rest. The other thing that's very interesting about scale jump is when it doesn't quantize, in the sense that when you hold something down and let it go, it'll just start playing the sequence from that point. So you can play with all these very, very interesting phasing patterns. It's really a marvelous little sequencer, very attractive little package altogether. So yeah, like I say, the thing I really like about it is the interaction between these modes, which was very, very unexpected and very delightful. So Korg did a really very good job here. So thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Thank you very much.